Okay, so is it just me or did it just get cold tonight? Is that literally, I mean, I know I've been away, but tonight it's absolutely freezing, so what do the CU do? Let's have a barbecue. So there we go. So, but I want to investigate a little bit about why it is that these people, these Christian students, are so desperate to put on things like barbecues when it's cold. They're so desperate to rent out lecture theatres in the evening. They're so obsessed, it seems, with giving you toasties or toast or T-shirts. It's now, isn't it? It's T-shirts. You can text a T-shirt.
Tomorrow, 5 p.m.
Tomorrow at 5 p.m. See, there you go. They're desperate. They're like heckling with information, so you know when you can get this stuff. It's obsessive, right? They just absolutely love it. And you get this, and particularly if you've grown up within a sort of Christian home, or you went to church as a kid, or the place back home that the church was around. The church, it's not just these individual Christians who are obsessed with getting you to come to events or texting questions or whatever it is. It seems like there's all this kind of collective of people made up of all generations, from the babies all the way up to the old fogies, and they're all desperate to get you to come in to their church. Come on in. We've got tea and biscuits. Look, there's bourbons. Come in. You must want bourbons. Like, what is the obsession with it? Why is everyone so determined to get you to go into these old buildings, or get you to go into these sort of scout huts, or sit in these lecture theatres, or go to the barbecues when it's freezing cold outside? Why is everyone so desperate to do it? And linked into that, why have people been so desperate to translate this book into basically every language known to man? It's just the fact they haven't finished doing it yet. Why are people so bothered about this? And why do people even write this in the first place? There's all sorts of theories that go around. It's like, oh, they want you. They, the Christians at the universities and the churches and the people who wrote the Bible, they want you to become Christians. So they've got more people on their side. So there's more people to share their videos and like their blog posts. But what is it all about? Well, the verse that we're going to look at tonight, there's two verses. We're going to flick them up on the board. Look at that. And we're going to have a look at these two verses from the end of one of the books of the Bible. It's a book called John, because it was written by a guy called John. There you go. Right. Now, he writes this towards the end. This is like chapter 20. There's 21 chapters. Towards the end of chapter 20, he writes this. Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may believe Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Did you catch that? This is why everything is happening. This is why the barbecues are on. This is why the people have got their bourbons out and their tea. This is what the churches are all about, so that you may have life. This is what it's about. It's making sure that people have life. They want you to have life. Those parents maybe who dragged you along to Sunday school while you were kicking and screaming, 7 years old, they wanted you to have life. The people who are standing there freezing cold in November handing out flyers for an events week want the people they're giving those to have life. The people who are making the barbecue tonight want you, if you came along, they want you to have life. They're not looking for more likes on Instagram. They're not looking for more people to agree with their view of politics. They're wanting you to have life. Before, we don't want to get too super philosophical on what is life, what constitutes life. What would it be to find life on another planet or anything like that? Just think about the five senses. We often talk about a lack of one of those senses to be a reduction in someone's quality of life. So imagine someone who couldn't see, they'd be blind. Imagine someone who couldn't taste, they've got no palate, they can't feel. They're completely desensitized and numb. Okay, someone who can't hear, completely deaf. And I've forgotten what the other one was. Smell. Someone who can't smell. Imagine that if you had none of those senses. What would your life be? You'd say, well, it's still breathing, it's still boom, boom. But you'd say there's no life there, would you? People would say that. But you see, when we talk about life in this sense, we're talking about these 5 senses as just being just the best way we can describe what this life is. Like, they're good as descriptions, but they don't go nearly far enough in describing the kind of life that comes if you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. So you see Jesus giving people, through the Gospels, you can read about it in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, you read about him taking people born blind and showing them the world, opening blind eyes. Can you imagine, just for a moment, you've never been able to see? And then your eyes are opened. Lights, colours, just flooding. Things you have only been able to touch or smell or taste before suddenly become visible. Think about the extent to which your life will be improved. Your quality of life will dramatically increase. That's just one of 5 senses. I mean, we talk about smell is probably the one that people would say, oh, if I lost one of them, what would you rather lose? Sense of smell or sense of touch or taste? Most people probably say smell. And we all sort of experience that a bit when, Freshers' Flu will be around soon. So you'll all get bunged up and you won't be able to breathe. You won't be able to breathe. And you think, oh, with smell, it's all right. But just think when you smell like freshly mown grass. Or like that new perfume. Or a great aftershave. Or the sea air. Or coffee in the morning. Or toast. Like you smell those things and it's like everything just tingles, like life. Oh my word, that's amazing. And the thing with smell is because you can't see it and often you don't know it's coming, it sort of just surprises you. And so you've not been able to smell something and suddenly you get a waft of it and you're like, wow, that's amazing. The sense of smell is just a tiny, tiny little description of what the life that Jesus is promising. Imagine you had no hearing. Completely deaf. In fact, you don't even need to imagine what it's like when people go from not being able to hear to hearing. Have you seen these videos you see them on YouTube all the time? I say all the time, but there's lots of videos now where someone has this special operation they've never been able to hear, and you see their faces, the faces of their loved ones, when they're talking to them, and everything changes. This person goes, well, I was living, yes, and I could see, and I can touch, and I could taste everything, but then I had this sense of hearing. It just changed everything. And you cannot watch those videos without crying, okay? You can't, because you just go, look at the life that's just come to that person. Look at the joy that's just come to that person's face as they've looked at their loved one, they've actually heard them speaking. You wonder how many weeks it is before they go, Mum, would you just shut up? Because I will tidy it later, okay? But just think of the other senses as well, the sense of touch. Like being numb. I mean, it's funny sometimes when your arm falls asleep or something, you're like, oh, well, pins and needles or something. But never being able to feel anything. Or taste. Not having a genuinely sort of delicate palate. Imagine if all you could, you were like, oh, I've eaten. This is a funny thing. People always go on about Japan, oh, you've got to try sushi. So I was like, oh, well, I'll only ever try sushi when I'm in Japan, because that way I can say, oh, I only eat sushi if I'm in Japan, right? It's horrible. Don't bother. It's a complete waste of time. No, but the people were sitting there and they were like, oh, this sashimi and this, oh, it's so good. Oh, mate, you must be loving this. Oh, with this green tea. I'm like, it's horrible. I don't like it. But the way they talked about it, I really wanted to like it. And I kept on sitting there, it's lovely. But you see, if you've got all of those senses, we can see in each of those that there is a dramatic difference between what someone thinks they're experiencing as life and what someone can experience as life. And so the reason why the Christians are on campus pulling people in to events and texting questions and all that sort of stuff is because they want you to have life. They want you to go through an experience which is more dramatic than being able to hear for the first time. More profoundly life-changing than being able to see for the first time. That's the reason the churches exist, and that is the reason why the Bible exists, and that is exactly the reason why John has written his gospel. You see, John says, verse 30, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these signs performed in the presence of his disciples are recorded in the book, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Now we've got to start off with what does it mean if you don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah? If you don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and therefore, what does that mean for you? Well, it means that you don't have life. It means that you're dead. Now, this is hugely insulting. People find this like, what? You're saying I'm like dead. Well, I'm not dead. I'm perfectly alive. I can see, I can smell, I can taste, and I can punch you in the face as well if you continue to insult me in this way, to say that my experience of life is so poor, so inferior to yours. Who are you to say to me that you've got life and I haven't? Who do you think you are? That's so arrogant. Well, let's just have a little think about what it means to be dead, what the proof of deadness is according to these verses. So these verses were written, this Bible was written, the book of John was written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and thereby believing that you have life. So if you don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, you do not have life. That is really hard to hear. Because it's so exclusive. It's so narrow-minded, isn't it? What about other people's perspectives? Well, because belief, trust, is everything in relationships. Trust is everything in relationships. I don't know if you've had this experience where someone you love believes lies about you. Someone that you care about believes a rumour that someone has spread maliciously. Someone believes something which is totally untrue about you. What does it do to that relationship? But it's even worse in this case. It's not just, oh, there was some truth some lie that was told about you. It's, no, when I come to speak to you about it, you don't believe me. You see, because Jesus in John's Gospel is called the Word of God. So when you don't believe in Jesus, when you don't trust Jesus, when you say that he's talking nonsense, you're saying that God is lying. Because God says, this is my word, Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God. And then later the Word became flesh. The person of Jesus of Nazareth. The baby born in Bethlehem. This is supposed to be God speaking. So if you don't trust what God says in Jesus, you say, I don't believe you, God. You're lying. Now, if you don't believe me about anything, then that's not an issue. Okay? It probably means we won't be friends. We're not going to be besties. All right? Okay? Because you don't believe me. I keep saying things, you're like, no, that's not true. I'm like, no, I genuinely have 2 children. Like, no, you don't, liar. I'd be like, okay, I don't know where you've got this information from or who you think I am, but clearly, if you're not going to trust what I say, then it's going to break our relationship. But there are all sorts of other people where it could be more severe than just breaking a relationship. I don't have a great relationship with a lot of firemen or fire officers. Okay? But if I refuse to believe what they say, when they say, you cannot go back into the building because it's dangerous and you could die. I mean, most of the fire alarms that will happen on campus, there'll be loads of them, but most of them will just be a mild annoyance. There'll be very little chance that anyone is going to be in mortal danger. But when you see that fireman with the white hat on, okay, he's the big daddy fireman, he's in charge of all the others, right? The white hat, if he says, don't go back in there, if you do, not only are you risking your life, you're also breaking the law. Because if that fireman says you can't go into the building, you are not legally allowed to go back into the building. And so the reason you're all standing around there in your SpongeBob SquarePants onesies like this, it's so cold, I've got lectures in the morning, The reason you're standing there is because they're waiting till that fireman says it's okay to go back in. They're waiting for him to give his word and say, it's all clear, in you go. And until he's done that, you can't go anywhere. So if you disbelieve me, we're probably not going to be friends, but you probably don't care about that anyway, right? I would genuinely care about all of you, right? If you disbelieve the fireman, you could be in mortal danger and you could be breaking the law. What if you disbelieve the God who created the heavens and the earth? What if you refuse to believe what he has said? What if when he speaks, and he speaks in Jesus, what if when he speaks you say, I prefer to think about it differently? Not only are you going to break that relationship, you will be in danger, and you have broken not the laws of the land, but his laws. You're refusing to believe him when he's spoken. So you're dead. But the good news is, everyone is working as hard as they possibly can, setting up barbecues, texting t-shirts, and putting out the bourbons, so that you can have life in him. And the life that is in him is that all of that punishment which you deserve for disbelieving the God of the universe and thinking you know better, all that punishment you deserve for the ways that you've treated other people, not just in deed and in word, but in your mind. All that punishment is going to be dealt with by Jesus. He's going to take the punishment for you. And in taking that, he is going to give you life. And he's going to give you life of a quality and glory and excitement that you can hardly describe. You can hardly capture it by seeing someone here for the first time, or seeing someone see for the first time, or someone tasting the most delicious sushi that's ever been made. All of those things are minuscule in comparison to the life that comes from him.